What's up, everybody? I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the support that you've given me. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up reading Empire in Black and Gold. This is book 1 of the Shadows of the Apt series by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was just right now. So I'm kind of torn here. I like a lot of what I read, and I feel like this was a 5 out of 5 for large portions of this book for me. I also don't know if, there were some parts that I really didn't like, and that make me feel like it's a 4 out of 5. So, because I am torn, my instant reaction is we're going to go 4.5 out of 5, which is a great score. That means I'm somewhere between liking it and loving it, and I think that's accurate. That's kind of how I feel here. But yeah, this was an easy 5 out of 5 for me for a large portion, but I was not in love with the middle section of this book. It kind of bogged down a little bit, didn't go the directions that I think my expectations set for myself on where the story was going to go. And I got a bit subverted in a bad way. But still, I love my time reading this. I can't wait to keep reading in this series. I can't wait to keep finding out more about this author. I know this author, I think, after this series kind of went more in a sci-fi direction. I'm not opposed to sci-fi, and maybe I'll really like what this guy has to offer, because he's a really good writer. This is not a super popular series. And, for the life of me, I can't really figure out why. Because this has a very low amount of reviews for a book that is as quality as it is. So this, at the time of me making this has 734 reviews on Goodreads. And that's not a lot. And I'm guessing that maybe part of the reason for this is because Tchaikovsky's first works were I think these were his first works, and then he switched over to the sci-fi. So, he never cultivated that fantasy audience, and then cultivated a different audience that probably knows him for his sci-fi stuff that isn't into this kind of stuff. So he kind of did this weird thing. It feels like as an author, sometimes you need to kind of pick a lane and stick to it. But yeah, this is great stuff. I got alerted to this series by my buddy Ben from Books with Genghis Khan. If you are not subbed to his channel, I'll put a link down below in the description. He's awesome. He's one of my top, 4 or 5 favorite booktubers out there, and he deserves your sub and your views. But he keeps talking about this book and this series to me, and I align with Ben on what I like more than any other booktuber out there. Just for whatever reason, almost always when he says a book is awesome, I find it to be awesome. And I know that he's going to be higher on this than I was. I'm sure he would say this is an easy 5 out of 5, and all of the books in the series are. I think it's a 7 or 8 book series, maybe more, maybe 10. But I'm a little cooled off from it than him, but I hope that I can get there. I threw this book into my Patreon vote. So every month on Patreon, I do a raffle where people can put a book in and spin the wheel, and whatever gets picked, I have to review. But I also do this thing where I pick 4 or 5 different books that I'm kind of interested in reading, and they vote on which one they want me to read. And this one won by a hair. And yeah, I'm really glad that I got it. So let me talk to you a little bit about the plot here, because my guess is you don't know much about this series because of so few people that have read this. So you've got this, let me try my best here because it's a little bit complicated world building in a good way. So you've got this area called the Lowlands, and I think you can kind of think of them as a huge valley. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's how I kind of picture it, which can't be true because it's huge. It's countries big, but it's not the mountains. It's flatlands. And it's this huge area that's essentially a bunch of city-states. And they have this kind of sort of confederacy that keeps them all together. And they've lived in peace and prosperity for decades and decades. There's this really old empire who is gaining power. And soon they're going to come to the lowlands for war. And the main protagonist of this story, or at least the main protagonist of this story right here, maybe not the series, is this guy named Stenwoldmaker. Now, he currently serves as a spy master for one of the cities, but nobody is really listening to him when he's claiming that these foreign people are going to come invade them. And it's fun. It feels kind of convoluted, why is he the only guy crying foul? It makes sense when you read this book. And in part, it makes sense because most of the people that he's trying to convince that this is a problem to have a financial stake in this not being a problem. The people that are going to attack them are their biggest trade partner. They're one of the biggest reasons that they are as prosperous as they are. So they're not going to just take the word of one guy to upset their entire economy, which makes sense, right? I love books where you have this huge moral dilemma. You see the truth, but you also can really understand the people that can't see it. And that's awesome. So yeah, they're not going to attack their main trading partners, and people don't really ultimately want to make that hard decision that's going to kind of, upturn life the way that they know it. So in response, he gets this group together of his niece and like a ward of his and a prince of another one of these kingdoms. These little city-states, really. Don't think of it as like a huge kingdom. But they're going to go and try to root out the truth here so he can alert his people before it's too late. The story is a rather isolated story, which is one of my biggest problems here, because what I just told you feels like it could be this big, huge, sweeping story with, tons of different point of views at different parts to tell this like epic sweeping tale. But ultimately, it really just follows this one group of people. Now, I know that stories have done this and then they split off. This is a huge series. Maybe it does that. Wheel of Time comes to mind in this regard, where, you had in the first book and I think mostly the second book, although this one feels more kind of like the second book than the first book of Wheel of Time, where you have this main group. They're going from point A to point B. They do have various points of view, but they're all in a, together. So you're not really understanding the greater, global situation going on. Now, there are moments here where the group kind of splits off, but they kind of come back together and split off and come back together. But it's not, doing this Game of Thrones thing, right, where they are going to tell, a point of view up in the north and one down in south and one over in Essos and, telling this big, huge story that's going to kind of hopefully come together. It's not that. And I kind of wanted it to be that. Maybe it will eventually turn into that. But that's just not the story that was being told here. And that's fine. But yeah, I thought it could have, it started out, it felt like that's what it's going to be, because it had this introductory chapter that I just love. It's one of my favorite, introduction chapters that I've ever read. I love it when a book, and I'm going to keep using this Game of Thrones, The Song of Ice and Fire analogy, in part because it feels like most people have read that. But it's also, I feel like, a nice kind of like barometer for things that are done right in a book. And what that book does is it throws you in on this situation that has something to do with the rest of the story, but it's really just more of a world-building thing, flavor, some intense action right at the start. In that book, it's these White Walkers attacking this individual guy, and it just is like, wow, what's happening here? It does kind of a similar thing, where you get thrown in to the ending hours of a siege, and you don't really understand why or what's happening, who the players are. Now, it makes sense later on. It kind of all comes together, but I love it. And then when we jumped into the first chapter, where we're doing now having a time jump and dealing with different people, I was like, oh, we're doing that thing that I love in fantasy. But yeah, wasn't to be, but yeah, we'll see if that continues or whether I just need to appreciate this book and this series for what it is. I can't say too much more about the plot without ruining things for you. I try not to ruin anything on this series, and it's just the way I like to do things. So let's go to the world building, which is absolute perfection. The world building here is incredible. Now, in part, what makes the world so nice is the different races that are at play here. Now, when I describe it, it's going to sound kind of hokey, but it works. You have these different, like kingdoms, and they're like the kingdom of the wasps. Wasps? I have kind of a list, so it's hard for me to say that word. And they're like the bad guys, supposedly. Maybe they have good reasons for what they do. You've got the beetle people. You've got are they grasshoppers, or you've got the moths. You've got these different people. Now, they're not like a moth. They all are humanoids with these small traits that make them, a little tougher in the beetle sense. They can fly if they're wasps. They all kind of have a little bit to them that gives them some flavor in the way that they kind of see things a lot differently. It's fun, it's unique, and I really, really liked it. Now, you also have this aspect where you have certain of these races that are apt and certain races that are inapt. And Shadows of the Apt is the name of this, and so that has a big play here. And I'm not ruining anything by kind of telling you what that's about because it's really cool. So a long time ago, there was magic users. Everybody kind of had magic, but eventually, a lot of the races embraced technology, and they kind of gave up the old gods and this old way of thinking about magic, and wanted to move in a more like technologically advanced way. And they've kind of either forgotten intentionally or unintentionally the past, and they are like a technology race. But then you have these inapt. Those are the apt. The inapt are ones who never embrace technology. They've lived this more like rural kind of lifestyle without any kind of technology, but they have embraced the old ways, and they kind of have some magical properties about them that none of the other races will even really acknowledge or really know about. It's more of like kind of like a hidden secret, but they've embraced their past. It's really fun, and I love everything about it. Now, the world itself, outside of the magical properties to it and what make these races unique, is very well realized. The map is gorgeous. It's big. You really feel like you're there with the characters. The map is way bigger than the events that are taking place, which I love. It makes it feel like real life. And the world is just amazing, and I won't stop thinking about it until I read the next book, which is great. That's what I want. The fantasy elements, which I pretty much covered here with the different races and the magic and the technology. It's awesome. I really like the magic here. It's not overly done. In fact, it's very infrequently done. But when it is used, it makes a lot of sense for the plot. It really feels like it drives the story forward. And you're constantly dealing with the differences between these races, which is great. The characters here, I thought, were very good. They're not, perfect. I thought the character writing was well above average. All of these characters underwent change. You feel like that's going to continue to happen, which I love about characters. They feel like they have depth. They feel very different from each other. And you really feel connected to these characters, which is what you want. Now, it's not some master class in character writing. Maybe it will get to that point. But yeah, it's got good characters. The prose I would put in kind of a similar category. It's not the smoothest, but it's definitely on the better side of things. Adrian Tchaikovsky, is that his name? Adrian Tchaikovsky? He tells good prose. And, he's got this kind of, it's not like outwardly funny, but he does have some like more comedic aspects to the way that he talks about things, which is fun. And it's good stuff, and I'm excited to see how he kind of expands as an author as this series goes along. You often find authors who have wrote their first works and their first series will very much improve over time over the course of that. And since I'm reading this now with the benefit of hindsight, it'll be fun to see if that change undergoes in the short time that I'm going to be reading these things. So overall, enjoyment, very good. Good stuff. More people need to read this. I would say in general, if you like a more kind of epic story, even though I wanted this to be more in the epic scope, it's really fun. If you're looking for a well-realized world with really fun magical elements to it, this is a great series. And more people need to be reading this and talking about it. And I won't stop talking about it because I can't wait to read the second one and report to you how much I enjoyed that. So I'm going to wrap things up there. Thank you so much for sticking with this thing. And as always, happy reading to you. I want to give another shout out to my patrons, especially my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons. Anna G, Brian, CJ, Darren, Jonathan, My Book is Lit, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Angelo, Ben, Blair, Brock, Evan, Harry B, Jamie, Joe, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion.